Hey folks, LumRanmaYasha here, and welcome to a very special Manga Mavericks at Movies, where me and VLordGTZ give our thoughts on the 90th Annual Academy Awards, aka the Oscars for the year of 2017. Now, unfortunately, we were not able to get this episode out before the Oscars as we intended, so you probably already know who won each category in the Oscars already, but I thought that this would still be worthwhile for all you guys to listen to and hear our thoughts on what we liked about all the stuff that was nominated for the Oscars and what we think they excelled at, especially some of the underappreciated categories like the short films categories, which not a lot of people talk about, but we devote a ton of time to. So with that, enjoy our discussion of the 90th Annual Academy Awards. Welcome to Manga Mavericks at Movies, the show where we don't talk smack about movies, but we praise them. Is that a better catchphrase, VLordGTZ? Is that a better twist on what our catchphrase has been up until now? A more accurate assessment of the show, that we don't talk smack about movies, except on the few occasions that we do?
I mean, sorta, yeah. I mean, what's the last bad movie we talked about? Death Note?
I believe it was no, because we saw Marvel's Inhumans, and then we talked about that.
Oh, right. That didn't really count as a movie, though.
No, it didn't. It wasn't really a movie, but we saw it in theaters anyway, and we talked about it anyway.
And it was bad.
Oh, yes. And you can listen to that episode, and that is definitely probably one of my favorite ad movies, and it didn't get a whole lot of love in our survey, but yeah, you should definitely listen to it, especially since it is an essential part of our ongoing narrative of this podcast that we have. But,
yeah.
But we aren't talking smack about movies today. Okay, we might at some points, but no, ostensibly, this podcast is going to be a celebration, VLord. Today, we are going to chat about the Oscars for this year, 2017, the 90th Academy Awards show, and we're going to give our thoughts on every single category and who we think should win, and then, after we give our thoughts on the entire Oscar nominations, we are going to talk about our personal favorite films of the year. How does that sound, VLord?
Sounds good to me.
Excellent! So, do you want to get started right away with our first category here? Do you want to start bottom to top, VLord? Do you want to end with Best Picture?
Yeah, I mean, let's end with Best Picture, so we're going to start with Best Visual Effects then?
We are, but first I want to say, you and I both saw a lot of films this year, including most of the nominees for these awards, so this is interesting for us, because usually we don't end up seeing all the films that get nominated for this stuff, but this time we have seen most of these films, so we will have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, like, the area that I've seen the least on here are the Best Documentary, both feature and short subject, and then the foreign film category.
Yes, those will probably be the two categories that we will skip, because I have seen none of the films in Best Documentary Feature and Best Foreign Films.
I can at least probably talk about Best Documentary, because I did see one of them. But
oh, okay, so we might talk about what documentary VLord saw, but we can't talk in full about Best Documentary Feature or Best Foreign Film.
Yeah,
though
like I was planning to see A Fantastic Woman tomorrow. Like, I think, like, literally they started having screenings in Minnesota tonight for that movie. So.
Poor timing.
Yeah.
I also plan to see all the films in those categories, and particularly with Best Foreign Film, I hope to see all the nominated films in that category within the next week because they are all showing in New York.
Lucky.
We've seen so many movies, so it's pretty exciting to be able to talk about all of these categories in depth. And while we might not have seen the documentary features, I did go and see the documentary shorts, and they were quite interesting, so I will have stuff to say about those. But we are going to start off bottom to top, working our way up to Best Picture. So we're going to go in the order of how it's listed on Wikipedia, because why not? That's what's in front of me. So let's start off with Best Visual Effects. And the nominees are Blade Runner 2049, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Kong, Skull Island, Star Wars The Last Jedi, and War for the Planet of the Apes. Now, of these films, I have not seen War for the Planet of the Apes, but I have heard and seen images of the film that suggest to me that this film is a masterclass in its visual effects for how it realistically portrays these apes, which are fully CGI creations. And they look incredibly realistic. And I particularly have heard that the orangutan in the film is incredibly well rendered and a masterpiece of CGI in these movies. And in general, the visual effects I've heard are pretty good. I think all the visual effects in all of these movies are pretty strong. I can't really say War for the Planet of the Apes should earn it because I haven't seen the film. So instead, well, I think there are some times in Kong Skull Island and Star Wars where the visual effects don't look totally meshed in with the movie.
Yeah, there is some weird, awkward moments. I mean, I'd say that even in, like, Guardians that happens, too.
Yeah, so for my money, I would give it to Blade Runner 2049, because I think the visual effects are a huge part of what made that world look so incredibly realistic, and maybe not realistic, but so vivid and so, like, lived in. So I definitely think the visual effects in that film were a huge part of creating that world and making it feel so, I'd hate to say alive because a big part of that film's world is that it feels dead, but it brought that dead feeling of that city to life.
Yeah, for sure.
So you would agree, VLord, that Blade Runner 2049 is the best pick, the one that should win Best Visual Effects.
Yeah, I agree.
Alright, one thing we should do, VLord, is that we should keep track of all our picks and see, after the Oscars, how correct we are. And then, depending on who had the most choices correct, we should have a reward for that person, whether it be choosing the next film to tackle on the podcast, or a punishment for the person who was not correct, or at least as much correct in their picks.
Huh. That sounds like an interesting proposal.
And do you accept that proposal, VLord?
I mean, sure.
Alright, great. So you make sure to keep track of all of our picks tonight.
Oh, okay. I'll probably just remember them in my head.
And otherwise, I'll be editing this. I'll be going through it again, so I'll make sure to write it down. We won't have to rely on a commenter like Mumkey did. And, by the way, that commenter was yours truly. I wrote down all of Mumkey and E. Rich's Oscar nomination predictions on that video. Yes, you are welcome. Anyway, let's move on to Best Film Editing. The nominees for Best Film Editing are Baby Driver, Dunkirk, I, Tonya, The Shape of Water, and 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. I think Baby Driver was the best edited film for how it timed up music to the visuals. Like, that syncing is just so spot on and perfect. And that rhythm the movie has is just so precisely fine-tuned that I really feel that Baby Driver is the best pick here. What do you think, VLord?
I'm kind of stuck between Baby Driver and I, Tanya. But I think I'd definitely have to give the edge over to Baby Driver for sure. Just like you said, like, just the syncing of the music with the action going on, and just the seamlessness of the action. Like, in that film, like, there's so many instances where you'll just go from this completely, like, more, like, subtle, like, kind of, like, more, like, I guess, like, subdued scene, just, like, basically, like, fucking, like, wave rush you into the action. Like, it just, it knows how to transition you with, like, intensity.
The timing of the cuts in that movie is just so precise and so just perfectly fine-tuned. I hate to repeat myself, but that really is the best way to describe it, especially considering the musical motifs of the film and how that is so important to describing and punctuating every visual moment in the film. Like, I think editing is a marriage of both the sound design of the film and the visual cinematography, the film edit of itself. So even if we remove the sound component, which, is a huge part of Baby Driver, but even if we remove that, like, the way the film is cut so deliberately to complement its score and its sound mix, I think is just so beautifully done, and it really blew me away. I'm curious, VLord, that I, Tonya was your runner-up for this award, and I want to kind of hear your thoughts about why that is.
I don't know, like, I feel like in I, Tonya, it just does a great job of kind of, like, really, like, cutting back and forth between, like, the kind of interview that they're doing and the actual scenes.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I do think that a lot of those cutaways are really well timed. And I do think that the other films in this category have really strong editing, too. In fact, probably the movie that I liked most out of these nominees, Shape of Water, probably is the weakest in the film editing category, just because I didn't notice how strong it is as much, which, they say that you shouldn't notice a well-edited film if it's, well-edited, but I disagree with that. I think that if you really pay attention to this stuff, you will really notice the craft if you're a cinephile.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so in that regard, I think Shape of Water is actually probably the weakest in this category. But regardless, I think we can both agree that Baby Driver is the strongest. And with that, we are 2 for 2 so far. We both have the same opinion. I wonder if that will continue as the night goes on. But we are going to move on and talk about Best Costume Design. And the nominees are Beauty and the Beast, Darkest Hour, Phantom Thread, The Shape of Water, and Victoria and Abdul.
First of all, why is Victoria and Abdul on here? Victoria and Abdul was shit.
Well, the Victorian-era designs were accurate, I guess. They weren't exactly impressive, I don't think. Well, they are pretty intricate designs, and they feel of the period, but yes, I also don't feel that they were distinct. And they're fine, the costume designs, but I think it doesn't hold a candle to most. Also, Darkest Hour falls into that category. They're just wearing, like, suits,
Yeah.
They don't really have very intricate costumes, and even if they tailor-made those suits, they're not the most, like, impressive, outstanding-looking things in the world, I don't feel.
I'd say out of all of them, like, I guess my choice would probably be Phantom Thread.
I mean, the movie is about making dresses.
Yeah,
it is about this category.
Yeah, so it kind of fits perfectly. It, like, personally, I'm not a big fan of Phantom Thread, but, like, I definitely, my problems with it were mainly with the narrative, while everything else around it is fantastic. So I think, yeah, it definitely deserves Best Costume Design.
All right. Well, I'm in total agreement with you. Aside from the fact that the movie is literally about making dresses, making costumes, those costumes are incredibly well made and incredibly interesting to see made, and yeah, they stood out to me. And it definitely helps that the movie was about that, but
they pledged it all out to win this category, Sid.
I mean, that's a big point in its favor. Yeah, I mean, it's a big point in its favor. It's pretty hard to beat out a movie that is about this subject in particular. And I'm sure Beauty and the Beast had fine costumes. I didn't see the film, but, those were probably pretty good. Shape of Water, if we count the creature as a costume design, that, we can't really. I think that was fully CGI. So I guess it would be the dresses of the people in the film, which were also pretty good, which were also, nice 50 throwbacks. But yeah, Phantom Thread stood out the most with its costumes. I think we're both in agreement in that. So now we're 3 for 3. All right. So, how about we move on to Best Makeup and Hairstyling? There's only 3 nominations in this category, which is interesting.
Is there usually only 3?
Maybe? I guess there are usually only 3, but all the other awards have 5. I should look at the history of these awards. I don't usually watch the entirety of the Oscars or hear, about who won in every category, so I don't usually pay attention to this category. So I guess I'll have to look at its history and see, if 3 is par for the course here, or if they just didn't feel like there were enough to nominate. Which, I'm pretty sure they could find 2 other movies to fill it out for even 5, but I don't know, I guess not. In any case, the nominations for Best Makeup and Hairstyling are Darkest Hour, Victoria and Abdul, and Wonder. Now, I really don't like either Darkest Hour or Victoria and Abdul, but I also have not seen Wonder. But if that kid's face in Wonder is true makeup and not CGI, then sure, let's give it to Wonder.
Yeah, I don't really have much opinion on this category, so yeah, I have to go with Wonder too.
Like the hairstyling and makeup in Darkest Hour and Victoria and Abdul, which, are period pieces, and they have those crazy British hairstyles, and those are well done. Those look of the period. They did those well, but if that deformed kid's face in Wonder was all makeup, sure, let's give the Oscar to that, because that's more impressive than the kind of more rote things that were done in Darkest Hour and Victoria and Abdul. We've seen well-done period piece costumes before in movies. We haven't seen, those kind of effects in Wonder in some time, or at least not as often.
Yeah.
At least nowadays.
So I guess we're 4 for 4.
Yeah, we'll have to continue. So, next category, Best Cinematography, Blade Runner 2049, Darkest Hour, Dunkirk, Mudbound, and The Shape of Water.
One interesting thing to note about this category is that Rachel Morrison, who's the nominee for Mudbound, is the first female to ever be nominated for their award.
And she deserved that nomination. I actually watched Mudbound right before we started recording this podcast, and the cinematography in that movie is really well done. So good on her for being the first woman to be nominated for this category. That said, I think that the other films in this category, except for Darkest Hour, were stronger with their cinematography. And I think that the best cinematography has to go to Dunkirk, because even if you might not connect with that movie narratively, it is a visual tour de force.
I do agree that Dunkirk is visually impressive and all that, but I think I have to give it to Blade Runner.
Ha ha! Our first disagreement of the night.
Yeah.
And why would you give it to Blade Runner? What's impressive about Blade Runner's cinematography compared to Dunkirk's?
You said with Dunkirk that it's the Tour de France of
Tour de Force.
Tour de Force.
Or no, it is set in France. So it is a Tour de France as well.
It's the evacuating France cinematic universe.
Actually, is it France? Isn't Dunkirk
I don't
Britain?
know. I don't think it's France.
Actually,
it's not France. It's
is it
Denmark,
France or
right?
Britain?
No, I don't know. Shit.
Let's see. Dunkirk. Yeah, Dunkirk's in France.
It is? Okay.
Yeah. So it is a Tour de France.
Okay, so personally I feel Blade Runner 2049 is just kind of mind-blowing visually. Just like the first film was just a spectacle for its time, I feel 2049 is the same way. It just looks so good and so crisp. It looks like a realistic future kind of environment. Bleak and everything within it, which I just love. And that's not to say Dunkirk is looks bad. Dunkirk looks great. And I also think Shape of Water looks great as well. But I feel Blade Runner just kind of edges them out.
You know, I agree with everything that you said about Blade Runner, but I do think Dunkirk, that is its biggest strength, its cinematography. I think that the way it depicts war and all the shots and how it visually communicates all of the emotions and all of the stress and all of the danger, I think the way that film is shot is its greatest asset. That and its sound mixing and design, as we'll, get to later. But yeah, Dunkirk as a narrative left me a little cold, but I can't say I don't appreciate it as a work of cinema. And in that regard, I think its cinematography was pretty stellar. More stellar than Nolan's previous film, Interstellar, at any rate. Oh!
Yeah, we don't talk about Interstellar. Interstellar was bad times.
Oh, gosh, yes. Dunkirk is way better than Interstellar.
Yeah.
Yeah. But hey, our first disagreement of the night. Let's see how many more of those there'll be. So let's move on to Best Production Design. And the nominees are Beauty and the Beast, Blade Runner 2049, Darkest Hour, Dunkirk, and The Shape of Water. It just occurred to me, should we be mentioning the people who are nominated for these categories?
Probably,
alongside?
since they're the ones who are getting the awards.
But I don't really know about the people as much as the movies, I guess. I don't know. I mean, the people are the ones winning the awards, though.
Yeah.
But I guess I can't speak to, the history of these people as much as I can the films. So, I can't really talk about, who should win the award in the context of, this is this person's history in filmmaking. And here is what this film represents about their body of work.
Yeah,
I
guess that's fair, but...
Yeah, I mean, I want to acknowledge the people who are actually winning the awards for their work on these films rather than, the films receiving the awards for themselves without thinking about the people. But, I just to clarify why we're just mentioning the names of the films and not also the people. I mean, we'll also mention the people from this point out, but we can't really talk about these nominations and awards in the context of the people's careers as much as we can the films themselves, because we don't know as much about that yet. We need to study up on that stuff for next year.
Yeah.
So, to go through Best Production Design again, for Beauty and the Beast, we have Sarah Greenwood nominated for Production Design and Set Decoration nominated for Katie Spencer. For Blade Runner 2049, Production Design, Dennis Gassner, and Set Decoration, Alessandra Cazorla. Darkest Hour, Production Design, Sarah Greenwood. Oh, a second one. And Set Decoration, Katie Spencer, and another second. Dunkirk, Production Design, Aidan Crowley. Set Decoration, Gary Fettis. Shape of Water, Production Design, Paul Denham Osterberry. Set Decoration, Shane Vanu and Jeff Melvin. So, hey, two things that stand out to me. For both Beauty and the Beast and Darkest Hour, we have the team of Sarah Greenwood and Katie Spencer nominated for both.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, hey. These two women are pretty awesome. It seems. They're pretty great production designers and set decorators. But, I mean, I can't really speak to Beauty and the Beast, and I didn't like Darkest Hour and didn't find the production design very impressive, so, I guess we're gonna rule those out. Sorry, Sarah Greenwood and Katie Spencer. I'll try to study up on your work, since you seem pretty prolific and well-loved. But, when it comes to production design, how would we judge production design? What do you think? I mean, previously the category was considered best art direction. So to me that implies what we think of production design is kind of like how the film looks in terms of all the elements in it. Whereas cinematography is how the film is shot. Production design is how the film looks. So we're going to judge it on that merit. And in that respect, I guess it would be between Blade Runner 2049 and Shape of Water for me. And while I think Blade Runner 2049 is beautifully shot, it is also very monochrome at times. In the stuff in the city is very blue-hued, and then the stuff in the Outlands where the protagonist meets up with Harrison Ford again is all orange-hued, so there's no spectrum of color in that movie. It's all usually monochrome lit shots.
Personally, I'd have to give it to Shape of Water.
Yeah, because Shape of Water looked beautiful. Like, I loved its 50s aesthetic, and the colors were very vibrant. They popped out. Like, that movie was a treat to look at. That was a colorful movie. And it had a range of colors to depict the emotions of all its environments. It never felt too much for me. I know it felt too much for some people, like the kind of too vibrant 50s it was. But to me, it looked beautiful, and I loved all the color in it. So yeah, I guess we're both gonna give it the best production design.
Yup.
Alright, so let's move on to Best Sound Mixing. And the nominees are Baby Driver, Julian Slater, Tim Cavagin, and Mary H. Ellis. For Blade Runner 2049, Ron Bartlett, Doug Hemphill, and Mark Root. For Dunkirk, Mark Weingarten, Greg Landacher, and Gary A. Rizzo. Shape of Water, we've got Kristen Cook, Brad Zorn, and Glenn Gauthier. And Star Wars The Last Jedi, we have David Parker, Michael Semenik, Ren Kleiss, and Stuart Wilson.
Yeah, Baby Driver's my favorite.
Yeah, it's really hard to argue with this, because Baby Driver is a film just all about sound and how sound correlates to the actions we are seeing on screen and how it informs the actions of the characters in the film.
It's like it's made for this movie. I just made for this category.
Yeah, Baby Driver is the best mixed film of the year. I think it's pretty clear. And it goes without saying that also counts for sound editing, which the nominations are Baby Driver, Julian Slater, Blade Runner 2049, Mark Mangini and Theo Green, Dunkirk, Richard King and Alex Gibson, Shape of Water, Nathan Robitaille and Nelson Ferreira, and Star Wars Last Jedi, Matthew Vaughn and Ren Kleiss. Yeah, again, Baby Driver, you have to give it to that. That film is about sound.
That's just a double whammy right there. Like, if there are any, like, two categories that I'm confident 100% about that Baby Driver's gonna win, it's those two.
At the very least, it should win for those two. I will say, though, that for best sound mixing, sound editing, Dunkirk would also be a worthy contender, because the way that film uses sound to create mood is also pretty masterful.
Yeah.
Not necessarily for, I don't know if it should count for sound mixing, because I feel that sometimes the film is too loud with its sound, and that becomes a little jarring and not very pleasant. I mean, I think it is purposeful the way the film is mixed, but I don't know. So I guess Dunkirk is a worthy contender for those two categories as well, but I don't think it beats out Baby Driver.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah. So our next category is Best Original Song, and we've got Mighty River from Mudbound, with music and lyrics from Mary J. Blige, Raphael Sadiq, and Tora Stinson. We've got Mystery of Love from Call Me By Your Name, with music and lyrics by Sufjan Stevens. We've got Remember Me from Coco, with music and lyrics by Kristen Anderson Lopez and Robert Lopez. We've got Stand Up For Something from Marshall, with music by Diane Warren, lyrics by Common and Diane Warren. And we've got This Is Me from The Greatest Showman, music and lyrics by Benj Pazek and Justin Paul. So I have listened to all these songs, though I have not watched Marshall and Greatest Showman. And I think that Mighty River, This Is Me, and Stand Up For Something are pretty on the nose of what their movies are about. And I just say that based on what I know about those latter two movies, Marshall and Greatest Showman. I mean, I know Greatest Showman, that is a musical number performed in the film. It's not just something on the soundtrack like some of the other ones in this category. But honestly, I think this clearly has to go to Remember Me, because that song is integral to that film. That is the emotional center of that film, and it's used in such powerful, unforgettable ways. Like, the rest of these songs vanish from my memory, even though Mystery of Love, I do think is a really good song that I like listening to. But Coco, that is a film that is affecting in how it's used.
Honestly, part of me has to give it to Remember Me, because, like, That's the one that I remember the most. Like,
Exactly.
Mystery of Love, I really like. Whenever I listen to it again, I'm like, oh yeah, this is really good. Then after a while, I'm like, I don't even remember what that sounds like anymore. Where with Remember Me, it's still stuck in my head. Like,
I don't think it's any coincidence that the song called Remember Me is the most remembered song nominated for this category. And as such, the one likely to win this category for Best Original Song.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So we're both in agreement. Remember Me should win the award. Remember that we said that Remember Me should win Best Original Song. But how about Best Original Score, VLord? The nominees are Dunkirk, Hans Zimmer, Phantom Thread, Johnny Greenwood, The Shape of Water, Alexandre Desplat, The Star Wars, The Last Jedi, John Williams, and 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, Carter Burwell. I think Star Wars is kind of a cheat because this is like the same themes that has been used for Star Wars for like years.
I mean, it's slightly remixed, so it's new.
I don't know if that really counts. I don't think there was any original tracks, and if there were, I didn't notice them. Let's see, I can't really remember any score in Dunkirk, like any music. That was like all sound to me.
For me, this is a split between Phantom Thread and Shape of Water. And I think, like, I don't know, like, it's hard for me to really compare those scores, too, because it's been a while since I've seen those films.
I honestly feel that I can't really remember the scores for any of these films that well. I mean, I think they use their scores effectively, but I don't, like, remember a musical moment from these films very well.
Like, I don't know, maybe I'd say I'd edge it out to Shape of Water.
You know, I might have to agree with you, if only because when I'm thinking of a musical moment from these films, the one that is leaping out to my mind right now is that opening scene of Shape of Water, where we are, like, seeing the underwater house, and, we are, like, slowly working our way to the reveal of the protagonist in that underwater house. And that's memorable not only for, the scene itself and how beautifully shot it is, but I do think the music accompanying it really set the mood really well.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
So I guess we're both in agreement. Shape of Water should win Best Original Score. And now we're moving on to the short films category, and we're starting off with Best Animated Short Film. Nominated for this category, we've got Dear Basketball by Glenn Keane and Kobe Bryant, Garden Party by Victor Clare and Gabriel Grapperparm, Lou by Dave Mullins and Dana Murray, Negative Space by Max Porter and Rue Kuwahata, and Revolting Rhymes by Jacob Skuh and John Lacor. I definitely mispronounced some of those names.
Fun fact about this category, when I was tweeting about how much I liked Revolting Rhymes, both Jacob Skuh and Jan Lacker actually liked my tweet, so that made me happy.
Hey, nice. I mean, I'm sure they were happy to see people, like, really responding to that film.
Yeah.
Because it is excellent. And Revolting Rhymes is actually a 2-part short film.
Which kind of makes me feel like it's cheating having it in the category, but at the same time it's so good.
I mean, it's only nominated for the first part,
yeah.
Which is why in the show we only see the first part. Like, if you watch the Shorts TV program that has all the best animated short films included, the first part is the only part that they show.
And it works as a standalone short.
Oh yeah, I think it might work better as a standalone than with the second part. I haven't seen the second part in full, but I read the synopsis of it, and it does kind of bum me out that there is a continuation of that story with the wolf and the children of Red Riding Hood, because the way that film ends is just so good when you don't know, oh my god, what's he gonna do? What's gonna happen? Oh.
Yeah.
So I like to pretend that, maybe there are 2 continuities here. One where something very different happens to those children than what is shown in the second short.
Yeah.
But this is a pretty tough category because all of these films were really expertly made. Dear Basketball is probably the most visually arresting of these films because Glenn Keane is, of course, a master animator, a veteran Disney animator, one of the all-time greats. And, his draftsmanship is just so incredible, and he really brings that film to life. And it has like a really strong emotional core of Kobe Bryant, like reflecting on his history with basketball and how much it means to him, and that even though he's retiring, it'll always be a part of him. Like, it is a very moving short film, and it is very beautifully done. And Garden Party, like, that is really good for just how good the CG is in that. Like, the frogs look so realistic, and the environments look so great, and like the way the film works up to its dark twist ending is just so great, and how, like, it drops these hints just so masterfully. Like, it leads up to a really great comedic reveal at the end.
Yeah.
New is a great film from Pixar that has a really strong emotional core to it, and a great design. Like, Lou is one of my favorite designs, probably my favorite character design out of all of these films. And I just love the way it's animated.
Lou is probably my favorite short film from, like, Disney and Pixar in a long time.
Oh yeah, it's
like,
way
I feel like last few years
year.
they've kind of been sticking to this thing of, like, just having this really well animated, like, cute short. Well, while Lou has some, like, legitimate substance to it, like, you can really kind of feel for, also, like, the bully and, like, the kind of just amalgamation of, like, clothing and, like, lost stuff and it wanting to, like, return to, like, their rightful owners.
It's so creative. It's such a unique story. It has a great heart and a great message, and it's just, I think this is one of Pixar's strongest short films in a long time. I think Lou is one of their best character designs ever, and I want to see more of that character. I want them to
Can we have a Lou movie?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say. I want to see a Lou movie. I want to see more of this character and how it moves, and, like, I want to see him absorb more lost items into himself, and, like, how that will change his design. It's just so creative how they've designed that character and how they, you know, played around with him and animated him. Oh, that was just a really fun film to watch. Negative Space wasn't necessarily a fun film to watch, but it was, like, you know, a very powerfully made film. I think, like, it had, like, a really cutting final line. Like, it was about this guy's history with his father and how they bonded over packing suitcases, and that was, like, their one real connection. And then when his father is dead, all he can do when he's looking at his coffin, the only emotion he can really feel is to, like, look at all that wasted space, look at all that negative space. Like, it is a really, like, interesting kind of idea. It is, like, a really, like, a film that has a lot of poignancy in its ending, I think. And it does have a really good, like, aesthetic that is also really cool to watch, too.
Oh, yeah, totally.
But I think you and I are both in agreement that our favorite of these films was Revolting Rhymes.
Yeah.
Because I love that film. It feels unfair because this is the longest film in this category.
But last year's best one was also the longest film, Parasiter.
But it didn't win.
It didn't win, but it was the best one.
I guess that is true, yeah.
I mean, like, if we're going with which one is gonna win, it's probably gonna be Lou.
Yeah, I mean, and I wouldn't be unhappy with that, because I think they do deserve it for Lou. Because
Lou's a good film.
Really good.
Yeah.
But my favorite was Revolting Rhymes, because I absolutely love that story. I love that twist on fairy tales. This is based on... Yeah, it's based on a Roald Dahl book, or a Roald Dahl book. I always say his name is Roland for some reason. And, you know, he's the author of James and the Giant Peach and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Matilda, Fantastic Mr. Fox, bunch of classics. So, you know, this is based on one of his short stories that, you know, also plays on fairy tales and twists on them in interesting ways, and they really brought it to life with, like, a super cool aesthetic, really fun character designs, and it was, like, just such a funny film and such a, like, awesomely dark film at times, and I just love everything about, you know, the story of, like, how Red Riding Hood becomes, like, this wolf-killing badass. I like how they play on the Snow White story. Like, they make just these fun little twists to the story that kind of modernize it in a way. And also, like, give it a lot of attitude. Like, a kind of a punk attitude in a sense. I really like it a lot. It's just, I love seeing fairy tales played with in such unique ways. I love seeing badass Red Riding Hood killing wolves. And I loved the ending where the Uncle Wolf reveals that he was stalking Red Riding Hood and is preparing to get revenge and ties up the babysitter he's been talking to and sharing this story with and dresses up as her and goes over to pretend to be the babysitter and enters Red Riding Hood's home to do who knows what with her 2 kids. And in the second half of the film, it doesn't turn out what you think how that story might go. But man, when that film ended, I was like, holy crap, this is awesome. I love this, and I am totally imagining like the alternate version where the wolf does do to that children what I thought he was gonna do. Oh man, that is so good. Do you have any additional thoughts?
Nah, you kind of summed it up right there.
Yeah, please check out all of these short films, but with Revolting Rhymes especially, I know that's on Netflix, both parts, so definitely check that out. Because that was such a treat. And I do look forward to watching the second part, even though it takes the story in a direction like I'm a little disappointed in, but it's still pretty interesting, from what I can tell. But let's now talk about the best live-action short films. And I'm less enthusiastic about these than the best animated short films. I have to admit, a lot of these are message films, and while I do think they have strong messages, I also don't feel like a lot of them say anything unique or interesting.
Yeah.
The one that isn't a message film is The 11 O'Clock, which is really funny, but I also totally predicted the twist that the therapist who thought he was the actual therapist turned out to be the actual crazy person, and the guy who seemed crazy was the real therapist. So, that was pretty easy to predict. But it was still a really funny film. I think that the best of the films was DeKalb Elementary. One, because it is a pretty relevant story, maybe pretty unintentionally so. I don't know if it's unfortunately so. In fact, it might be helped by what has happened recently. I can't tell. This is based on a real story, so, it's really fascinating to watch, how this woman diffused this gunman who was clearly mentally disturbed and mentally disabled in some way. And, somehow he got a gun in his hands and he decided to shoot up an elementary school and then kill himself. But, she managed to, convince him that he shouldn't do that and managed to, talk him out of it and surrender. And I think the way the film kind of makes you realize, oh, this is a person with, mental problems, and he's, really kind of a child, and he's a dangerous child with a gun, but he's also, kind of a child who is very complicated because we can't, overlook crimes committed by mentally disturbed people like this guy, but also we can see, okay, so it isn't black and white here. There can be a way to diffuse situations if they're handled right in certain cases like this. And because this is a real life story and based on a real thing that happened, that also gives it some more power. I mean, and then again, we can also say the same thing for My Nephew Emmett and Watu Wote, but I feel with those stories, they don't present a new perspective on something. Because My Nephew Emmett is about the murder of Emmett Till, and it's about, the fear and dread as Emmett's uncle waited and was fearful of those people who came to take Emmett away and murder him that night. But I don't think it really had anything new to say about, racial violence or what happened to Emmett Till. I mean, it showed it from the uncle's perspective, but I don't know if that was, necessarily something we didn't really know about, how those people must have felt. It's good to depict it, of course. It's good to remind ourselves of, what happened and, how scary that was for the people who experienced it. But I don't know if it was, really novel, the ideas expressed in it. That doesn't mean that they weren't invaluable, but I'm just really appreciative of new ideas, new ways of thinking about something. And so in that way, I probably like Watu Wote the least, because even though that's also based on a true story, it should be a foregone conclusion that, yeah, obviously people will come together to protect other people because there are good people in this world, and it doesn't matter what your religion is, because good people will protect other good people. Even if that person was, like, a bigot towards them at first. Like, you know,
it's
that
a bit
woman...
of an overdone message.
Yeah, that's how I felt about it. It's like, you know, this is based on a real story that is inspiring, reminding us of all the good in the world, and that's very cool, and that's very great to remind ourselves of that. But I do feel it was, like, so on the nose. Not as on the nose as The Silent Child, which is a film that I really was enjoying at the beginning, but then it took a turn into, like, the overdone. It was like, oh, the child is not the father's child. The mother had an affair. But they don't really go into that at all. And then at the end, like, the sign language expert is, like, fired from taking care of the child.
One thing I'm legitimately curious about that is that what parent is dumb enough to actually think
that was totally believable, Warren. I totally believe that
not
there are parents
learning
like that.
sign language.
Yeah, I totally believe there are stubborn.
At this point,
I totally believe there are stubborn, arrogant people.
Oh yeah, I
would
certainly
think that
believe
way.
that, but like,
I mean, that's why the film was made, because there are people who think that way, and this film is trying to raise awareness. But I thought it was just too on the nose. I thought, like, the ending where the child.
That's part of my problem though, is that doing that type of stuff just makes it feel so on the nose, because it does. The parents are putting zero initiative into actually even attempting anything.
I mean, what I dislike most is the idea, the implication, that the reason why the mother takes the child away from the sign language teacher is because, you know, she felt like the sign language teacher was becoming more of a mother to her child, and the child was, like, really thinking of the sign language teacher as her mother more so than her real mother, which rubbed her the wrong way. And so that's why she wanted to break that connection even more so than believing that her child didn't need to learn sign language. I think that petty reasoning, while still believable, was pretty forced.
Yeah. And at the same time, I just feel like this is a problem I have with basically all of the films, is that they feel like they're more about the message than the actual story that they're trying to tell.
I mean, this film is also based on a true story. It's based on the film of the writer and main actress, Rachel, who actually did experience this. This is actually something that happened when she was working with a deaf child, and this is something that, you know, that mother actually did. But, like, the framework around this film, like, a bunch of the details about why the parents do what they do, and, like, this whole unneeded implication that the child is the result of an affair, and that somehow is feeding into things, like...
It feels very weirdly dramatized when it didn't really need to be.
It was overly dramatized. I mean, this is raising awareness for an important issue. It should hopefully successfully raise that message, because I think that this film does do a good job in showing how sign language helps, you know, mute and deaf children, you know, learn to communicate really well, and the value of that. I just feel like it was a little too on the nose, and I didn't really care for that, and I really thought the ending was, like, so overdone, where she, like, signs, "I love you." Come on. That's pretty...
like, honestly, like, among these short films, my favorite was probably The 11 O'Clock, simply because I felt like, I don't know, it was the one that just, like, gave me, like, legitimate enjoyment out of.
The 11 O'Clock?
Yeah. Like,
that's fair. I think that was like the funniest film, but it was also...
Yeah, it was predictable and stuff, but, like, I kind of got more out of it.
And, you know, no matter how poorly the other films might have conveyed their messages, at least they had, like, something they wanted to say, an issue they wanted to raise awareness of. So I kind of have to put 11 O'Clock down in that respect for not being so ambitious as those other films. And in that regard, like, in terms of how those other films explored their messages and their ideas, I think DeKalb Elementary was the most interesting and successful.
Yeah, I feel like, especially like you said, it resonates so hard with us now, especially because mass shootings are such a big thing in the U.S.
Yeah, this film really does, like, raise questions about gun ownership and how easy that is. Like, how can someone like the shooter in this story gain access to a gun when he's so clearly mentally disturbed? And also about, like, treating mental illness and helping mentally disabled people like this guy who clearly did not have a reliable support system, or at least not a support system that was really keeping tabs on what he was doing, and also a system like that was able to overlook him escaping from a hospital or wherever he was and letting him run loose. So I think that it definitely raises important ideas and is worth discussing. And all these films do that, but I think this one, like, explored the message the best compared to the other ones.
Yeah, for sure.
They're all interesting films, so I do recommend checking them up and forming your own opinions on them. But speaking of films with messages, let's talk about Best Documentary Short Subject. Now, you haven't seen any of these, and I don't know if you'll be able to see any of these anytime soon.
I think they're being released on a video on demand after the Oscars, so...
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I know for a fact that Heroin is a Netflix documentary, so you can watch that pretty readily.
Oh, okay, cool.
But, yeah, so obviously, Best Documentaries, Short Subject, these are all true stories, so they're all very interesting. And a lot of them are very powerful stories. I guess to go in the order of how they were shown in the theatrical screening, because of the length of these documentaries, they were separated into two programs. So in the first program, there were 3 films, and in the second, there were 2. And in that first program, the first film shown was Traffic Stop. This film was about the unwarranted arrest of a black teacher in Austin, Texas, back in 2013, I believe. The Wikipedia for this is not very helpful to remind me of all the names involved. I do remember the white police officer's name who stopped the woman. His name was like Officer Richter. And yeah, he was a scumbag. So basically the story here was this officer tailed this woman and to ticket her for speeding. She stopped in the parking lot of a restaurant or a store. So, like, she stopped on her own, and then she was confronted by this police officer who told her to sit back down in the car so he can write her the ticket. And then they got into kind of like an argument in the car, but she was still in the car. She was still cooperating with the officer. But at some point, the officer asked her to put her feet back in the car, and she tells him, "Get out of the way of the door so I can, close the door." And he gets upset at her, and then he asks her to get out of the car so he can arrest her for nothing, for, I guess, sassing him, for, I don't know, resist. He has no reason to arrest her. She committed no crime, other than, I guess, being rude to this guy who was being rude to her. And so he forces her out of the car. He grabs her from the car and throws her down on the ground violently, and violently is like trying to arrest her and causing physical pain towards her. And it's like really uncomfortable stuff. They show the actual camera footage, the actual footage of what happened that day and what went down. So this isn't recreated stuff. They show the actual stuff that happened here. And probably the more disturbing... Okay, so he violently, assaults her and then, arrests her for nothing. And then he calls in another officer on the scene. And they conspire. There's no doubts about it. They are conspiring to validate this guy's story to make it out so that that woman is in the wrong, and she is being rightfully arrested when she is, being wronged by these people. The other police officers are corroborating with this guy's story for their own justice. They knew full well that what happened, what went down, was probably bullshit, right? Because they're asking, is this on the camera? And they're like, oh, maybe, and they're trying to cover this up. You see them clearly trying to cover this up. This is actual footage here. This is what actually happened. And what's more disturbing is when she's being driven away to jail, And she's having a conversation with the guy that is driving her, which is like a completely different guy. They called it a scene. She was, making a fuss. Oh, God. Like, when they were forcing her into the car, like, a comment one of the police officers says is, man, she has some fight in her. Like, a flippant, humorous remark about violently pushing this woman into this police car. It's like, so aggravating. So awful. But the most aggravating thing is the conversation she has with the police officer who's driving her to the police station, where, they're talking about racism, and, like, this cop says, you know why people are afraid of black people? It's because of violence in the black community. Now, I'm not saying that is true, but 99% of the time, when you hear stories, you're hearing about violence in the black community. So people think black people are violent. I want you to think about that. I want you to think about how wrong you are for being black, because black people are so violent. And racism goes both ways. Don't you think that black people can be racist towards white people? It's like, oh my God.
Were all these cops white too?
I don't know the race of the last one, but yeah, all the other cops are white men.
Jesus fucking Christ.
Yeah, so all this, like, the footage of everything that went down, what happened to her, is just so infuriating and aggravating. And I wanted to like this film more because of that. I wanted to like this film because of what it showed, like this real footage that it showed. But unfortunately, I felt that the other footage framed around these scenes was not very moving. Because all the other stuff in this film that isn't like the real life footage of what happened to her is like stuff showing her life and like how great a person she is, and like, oh, she's such a wonderful person. Isn't it awful about how this happened to her? But it really has nothing to do with, like...
It just seems like so unnecessary, too, because
Yeah, it seems unnecessary, because...
Like, that footage alone seems like it's no justification to be like, yeah, this is fucking wrong. These guys are just power-hungry pieces of shit who love their white privilege.
Yeah, she was wrongfully arrested, but it doesn't matter that she's this college graduate and great teacher. Like, even if she was, like, this poor, jobless person... Like, she would still be wrongfully arrested in that situation. It doesn't matter, like, how great a person you are or how accomplished you are. When you are wronged by racism, by a racist system, and a system that is conspiring against you to cover up their own racism, you are wronged. And it doesn't matter, like, how great your accomplishments are before that, because that doesn't make it any more just. So I really felt the film undermined its own message by having that, like, self-filating depiction of this woman. And, like, she is a pretty cool woman. Like, she seems pretty cool. But I think that was, like, it sent an unintentional wrong message to, like, say, oh, look how great this person it is. Isn't it awful how this happened to her because of racism? Because, like, this film is more than about her. This is, like, further evidence of an epidemic that is hurting so many people. And the film should have been about that in a more broader scale, I feel. The next film shown after this was Edith and Eddie, which was the story of a really old interracial couple, a couple who met each other in their 80s and married in their 90s, actually. And, like, how they were torn apart because of Edith's selfish daughter who wanted to sell off Edith's home for money and threatened to split the couple apart, and did split the couple apart because she took away her home and sold it. And so she took Edith all the way to Florida with plans to take her from her home and, separating her from Eddie and just leaving Eddie without Edith, even though, Edith did not want to go, and they told her they didn't want to go, and they refused. But her daughter and the person that they called in to be Edith's guardian, who had never met Edith until the night that she brought a bunch of cops to take her away, to put her on a plane to Florida without her consent, never met Edith before that night, never had a conversation with her before that night. So they split up Edith and Eddie, and Eddie is hospitalized 2 weeks later and then dies shortly afterwards. And they wouldn't even let Edith come to see Eddie when he was sick in the hospital, and they didn't come. They didn't let her come to see Eddie when he passed away, and they still, at the time this film was made, they still didn't make the funeral plans for Eddie, and she still hasn't seen him, and Edith has Alzheimer's, so that's another layer of, well, she was like really, really connected with reality when she was with Eddie. Like, Eddie was like, helping her stay in touch with her memories. So separating her from Eddie, was devastating in that respect too. And like the idea that she might forget Eddie because she's apart from him and no one is taking good care of her, because another reason she didn't want to go to Florida is because her daughter's husband was a violent abuser who mistreated her in the past, and she did not want to be around him. So who knows what's happening to her. It's just such a sickening story that they broke this old happy couple apart for such selfish reasons. And the scene where, like, Eddie is telling the guardian, some guardian she is, of Edith, that she is a monster and she's evil for what she's doing, and she has no heart because, one day she'll be... He also tells this to, Edith's daughter, that, one day she'll be old and she'll regret the way people are treating her, like the way she's treating her own mother and the way, this guardian is treating Edith. And, like, the fucking guardian, she laughs it off and says, oh, you know what? I am thinking of Edith's best interest. And it's like, fuck you. I literally muttered that under my breath in the theater because it was just... And this is like a real actual conversation, because they actually recorded this. They had, like, mics in that room when this happened. Because the documentary was, like, being set up as this was all taking progress. So they got all of this. Like, they got all this in real time. And it's just so sickening and so awful. And I hope, like, that guardian, that court-appointed guardian of Edith and, like, her daughter who ripped her away from her husband, I hope that, they see some serious backlash now that this film is out, and they understand how in the wrong they were. And they can't live with a guilt-free conscience. Because what they did was just so despicable, so wrong. And so this film really raises a great point of, like, the abuse of elders, how we are ignoring their rights and mistreating them is just such a disgusting problem. So yeah, this film really got me worked up, really made me mad. But the next film that was shown in the program, Heaven is a Traffic Jam on 405, probably affected me the most emotionally, because it was like a pretty powerful story about this, like, artist who is, like, pretty mentally challenged, and she's recounting her life experiences and, like, her kind of awful history with her mother, who, like, was repulsed by her as a child, and her father abused her as a child. And it's implied he might have sexually abused her as a child, even though, like, she, doesn't want to believe it. But when she was a child, she drew this picture of, him with a large penis and her crying. And it's like, oh, what happened to make her draw that? This is scary stuff. But ultimately, even with how, like, a mess her childhood was and all the struggles with depression she had, ultimately the film is uplifting because, she channels all her emotions through her art, and she makes legitimately interesting art and unique art. And at the end of the film, she has this art show, which a lot of people attend, and that's, like, really validating. And, like, really shows just how far she's come and, like, how appreciated, like, she is, and, like, how she's really learned to make the most out of her life, and, like, how that has reaped benefits. Like, the title of the film is about her appreciating a traffic jam, and finding, like, pleasure and the good things about that. So, there's really a lot to respect about this woman's outlook on life, and it was, like, kind of a really moving story. So, I really appreciate it, and like that. The artist's name is Mindy Alper, by the way, if you want to check out her art. She did, like, sculptures and drawings, and they were pretty interesting. So then in Program B, and I know that I'm talking a lot about this, but I kind of have to describe this to VLord. And also because, like, I need to talk about them because I had so many thoughts. So many thoughts. But the next film is
left. Like, don't you only have one left?
I have two left.
Wait, what? Oh, okay.
So, Heroin is the Netflix documentary, and that was also like a good look at, the drug problem in the city with like the biggest drug problem in the world, Huntington, West Virginia, where the overdose rate is 10 times the national average. And it follows like various police, judges, and nonprofits helping people with addiction and encouraging them to recover. And the main kind of character, like the main point of view, is the fire chief Jan Ratter. And actually, the documentary shows her career before becoming chief and then when she becomes chief. So it's very interesting to be able to capture that moment too, which is pretty historic because she's like the first female fire chief in that city and perhaps the state. I can't remember if that they made a point of that. But, this was also like a good look of like how police and the law system and, just local people were trying to help these addicts recover. And, there were some failure stories. There are dead bodies that we do see very tragically. But there is also like a very powerful, inspiring case of someone Jan helped who, comes to visit, to, attend her, coronation as fire chief. And, she calls out to him and says, I owe a lot to Mickey and, the relationship we've had and like, how helping him has taught me so much. And, Mickey is crying, because he values like how Jan has like really saved his life. So it was a really touching moment there. It's really good look at this problem and how, law enforcement and the judicial system and just people are trying to help curb this epidemic, which is, still an incredible problem, but, something that it feels like they're making progress towards solving. At least the film is optimistic about it. And then finally, we have Knife Skills, which is about this restaurant that was founded by an ex-convict and is staffed entirely by ex-convicts.
Oh.
Like, the idea of this restaurant is that it is a training program to help rehabilitate people recently out of prison and teach them skills in cooking, and especially high-class French cooking. So the restaurant is called Edwin's Leadership and Restaurant Institute, and it shows like the journey of, the initial class of people who were, brought on to become staff at Edwin's. And they started with like 80 people, and by the end they only got to about 35. But those were 35 people who, when we see like their graduation ceremony and like all that, they have learned from this and how this has really changed their life, it does feel like, wow, this is quite the inspiring thing. And, there are people who fall off the track and we do follow them, but also the movie is like a little more hopeful about them as well. Like, they're going to also try and rehabilitate their lives. And one guy who, originally leaves Edwin's on bad terms with the restaurant manager eventually is able to, make amends and be accepted back into the program. Although he, isn't accepted back into the current program, so he misses out on the graduation with all the other people he started out with. But, hopefully, I don't know if this guy ended up completing the program in a second go-around, but hopefully he did, because it seemed like he was really affected by the fact that he missed out on, this great thing, this, like, real accomplishment, and he wanted to have that for himself. So that was a really cool story about this really cool restaurant that I want to visit someday. Edwin's Leadership and Restaurant, Fine French Dining. It's in Cleveland, Ohio. It's still going strong, and yeah, I would want to visit it one day. So, I guess now that I've gone through the trouble of explaining all these films in detail, which, this is probably the longest we're going to spend on any of these categories, simply because I had so much thoughts on these films that I wanted to talk about them in detail. But, actually, I'm curious, VLord, like, based on what I've said about all these films, which sounded the most interesting to you?
I don't know, I guess the knife skills one sounded pretty interesting.
But I guess that was also the most recent one you heard about, so maybe you forgot about the other ones.
I feel like these are things I probably would have to watch for myself just to see, like, how I think of them.
I mean, I do recommend them because, honestly, I enjoyed all of them a lot. I think they were all great. I mean, I guess Traffic Stop I have some real problems with, but I still think it's worth seeing for, like, the actual live camera footage of what happened when this woman was arrested and how long it was. But I think my favorite, the one I want to win, or at least, the one I want to win is Heaven is a Traffic Jam on the 405. Because that definitely affected me the most personally in terms of how I connected with that woman's story. And it was also, like, the most, like, interestingly edited because, like, the film uses interesting animation techniques as well as, like very interesting cinematic tricks to convey the woman's emotions and, like, her anxieties and her claustrophobia and, like, so in terms of, like, just also, like, film editing and cinematography, I also think it was, like, very astounding. So that's another reason why I think it deserves the win. But honestly, I would be fine with pretty much any of these winning because they were all very incredibly made documentaries. I mean, I guess Traffic Stop, again, would be the one that I would be least happy about winning, but it's still an important story that needs to be seen by a lot of people and does deserve recognition and attention, so I still wouldn't mind. But you have one feature documentary that you saw that you want to talk about, if I'm not mistaken, VLord.
Yeah, so among the best documentaries that I saw, the only one I was able to see was Faces Places. It was a pretty interesting film. It's about two French photographers, Agnes Varda and JR. And Agnes Varda has been basically in the kind of film and photography industry in France for several decades. Like, she's won lots of awards in both film and just, like, photography contests. And JR is kind of an up-and-coming, more, like, modern photographer in the current landscape in France. So the film itself was about both Varda and JR kind of visiting these rural areas in France and kind of just interacting with the communities, and, like, whenever they go to a town, they'd work together with the people in the town to build these large portraits of the people and plaster it onto the buildings so that they can be remembered. And it's just kind of a very interesting film because, like, they go to, like, several towns, they kind of talk about the story of these people, what their lives are like, what keeps them going, and it feels like a very kind of, like, nice journey. And the music is great, the visuals are extremely colorful. Just in recent memory, it's probably one of the most, like, vibrant films I've seen. Like, I guess, in terms of, like, recently. And yeah, all around it was just a fun, like, documentary.
Awesome. I'm actually planning to see it this weekend, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I mean, all these other documentaries, too, are pretty easily accessible. Like, 3 of them are on Netflix.
I actually think that all of them in Faces Places are on Netflix, because I checked recently.
Is Abacus on Netflix now? I thought it was only on Amazon Prime.
Oh, actually it might be on Amazon Prime. I don't know.
Yeah. But yeah, Strong Island Icarus and Last Man in Aleppo are all on Netflix.
Alright, well, we have Amazon Prime, so we can still see that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Faces Places is the only one I need to go to theater to see, and then I can watch the rest on Netflix, hopefully sometime in the future. So yeah, this is one of the 2 categories where I have not seen any of the films in. The next one being, the next category, Best Foreign Film. But I do plan to see all the films in these categories, and then maybe at some point we might share our thoughts on them in the future.
Yeah, it was fine to see Fantastic Woman probably tomorrow, and then Insult, I missed my chance to see it over here, but hopefully it comes on to, like, Netflix or Amazon or something soon. I think The Square is already, like, up for rent on Amazon, so I might watch that. But, like, I think that's about it.
Yeah, I mean, I have the opportunity to see all the best foreign films, so I definitely want to take that opportunity while I still can, because they won't be in theater forever, once the Oscars are over, I'm sure.
Yeah. So, next category.
Yeah, next category. The Best Animated Feature Film. We got the boss baby, the breadwinner, Coco, Ferdinand, and Loving Vincent. I don't know why I read it out, those all out like so fast and flippantly when I gave such grandeur to all the other, announcements.
Okay.
Especially since I love 3 of these films. Breadwinner, Coco, and Loving Vincent are incredible.
But Sid, the best movie's Boss Baby. I don't know what you're talking about.
That's a meme. Boss Baby is not a bad film. It's pretty enjoyable. It's
Cookies
just not...
are for closers, Sid. Cookies are for closers.
It's a funny line. I don't know what you want from me. It's a funny line. It's a meme. But yeah, Boss Baby is a meme of a movie. That's how people treat it. More people know it from memes than actually have seen the movie. But it's a decent movie. It's not best animated feature quality in my eyes, but it's fine. Ferdinand's
what they
also...
really should have put on there is the Emoji Movie.
No. Ferdinand's also probably fine. I didn't get a chance to see it because that left theaters really quickly.
Yeah, it just shot out of there.
Yeah, so I did not have a chance to see that. It's not on streaming yet, so. But I don't think that any of these movies hold a candle to Loving Vincent.
Yeah, Loving Vincent's the best one, hands down.
Yeah, we're about in agreement.
In terms of what's going to win, it's going to be Coco.
Yeah, that's not undeserved because Coco's a great movie, but Loving Vincent is such an artistic accomplishment. It's the first animated feature that is fully hand painted, fully traditionally painted. It's so beautiful and incredible, an artistic accomplishment, because this is most of the people working on this film weren't trained animators, they were trained artists, and that really shows because they are recreating actual Van Gogh paintings. Every background, every character design is based on a Van Gogh painting, and it's just an incredible tribute to the man's life and legacy, and exploring the idea of why did he die, or what drove him to commit suicide. And it's just so fascinating.
Yeah, definitely. And honestly, I'm really glad that this is getting so much attention that it has. Especially, the Academy Awards is very anti-rotoscope. For several years, they refused to acknowledge it as, legitimate animation. Because the Academy knows jack shit about animation.
I feel that they couldn't ignore the subject of this film, though, because it's about an incredibly respected artist, and the Academy loves movies about artists.
Yeah.
Especially period pieces about artists. And, this film, again, is, incredible accomplishment, and it is, fully traditionally painted. So that's another, point in its favor.
Insanely impressive.
It's just, again, as an animator, the technical accomplishments of this movie are mind-blowing to me. It's, insane. I really want this film to get the award because of the level of craft and skill on display here, because that is just so masterful. And the story is nothing to shy at either. It's an incredibly interesting story. And Coco is a well-deserved winner, too. I definitely think that, because it is also, very, they keep pushing the bar.
It's one of Disney Pixar's best films in recent years.
Yeah, I mean, the way they depicted the City of the Dead is incredible. There's so many layers to that scene, and it has a really powerful emotional center. So it's it's a great film that I totally would enjoy seeing win. But I would love to see Loving Vincent win.
Yeah, we all would.
Well, all of us who've seen it at the very least, which
so
unfortunately...
everyone who isn't the Academy?
Literally no one else who I follow who reviews movies and talked about the Oscars saw Loving Vincent.
That surprises me.
Not Brad Jones, not Mumkey Jones, not Chris Stuckman, not the Psychology in Seattle podcast. No one.
It's pretty easily accessible too, and it's not that expensive on Amazon or anywhere.
Yeah, but no one's gone out of their way to watch it. they didn't know what it was until it got nominated for the award, and only
That
the people
surprises me.
And only the people who really care about seeing every movie that gets nominated for Oscars are going to go out and see it. So, like, most audiences do not know what Loving Vincent is, and that is like a crying travesty. That is a travesty. If you have not seen Loving Vincent, I am ashamed that I did not edit our podcast on it before this so that you would know why you should watch that movie. But I'm going to say right here, right now, that go out and watch it, because that is the best animated movie of last year. Without a doubt, that needs to win Best Feature. I don't care about your anime movies that you feel were snubbed from the Oscars. You know what? Loving Vincent is a better film than Your Name. It is a better film than A Silent Voice. It is a better film than In This Corner of the World. And it deserves respect and attention and support. So go out and watch it. Just do it.
Yeah.
Do you agree with my assessment that it was better than all those anime movies that got snubbed for the Oscars?
I mean, I think that they should have been there instead of Boss Baby and fucking Ferdinand, but...
Yeah, we can both agree on that.
Yeah, I mean, Loving Vincent, yeah, it's good. It's amazing.
Yep, we're both in agreement on that, so let's move on to Best Adapted Screenplay. We've got Call Me By Your Name, written by James Ivory, based on the novel by Andre Ackerman. We have The Disaster Artist, written by Scott Neustadter and Michael H. Weber, based on the book by Greg Sestero and Tom Bissell. We have got Logren, a screenplay by Scott Frank, James Mangold, Michael Green, story by James Mangold, based on X-Men characters. We've got Molly's Game, written by Aaron Sorkin, based on the memoir by Molly Bloom. And we've got Mudbound, written by Virgil Williams and D. Reyes, based on a novel by Hilary Jordan.
Among these, I'd probably have to give it to Logan.
You know, it's hard for me to really call this category when you haven't read, like, the source material it's based on.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
And I haven't read the source material for any of this stuff. I
guess if we're just solely basing off the screenplay itself, though, I guess. I don't know.
Like how it's written? I mean, you've seen Disaster Artist, so you've seen one more film in this category than I have. I have not seen Disaster Artist or Molly's Game.
I was going to see Molly's Game, but then I just completely forgot to see it.
Yeah, I got out of theaters before I ended up seeing it.
Yeah, Disaster Artist was good. I feel that, I guess if anything, it definitely does I feel like it dramatizes what, Greg Sestero and Tommy Wiseau kind of went through before the film came out.
I heard it sanitizes what they went through.
Yeah, okay, like in
they
some
depict
parts.
Tommy as a way better person.
Yeah,
Greg did.
that part they do sanitize, but like they do try to like put this drama in where like Greg starts like fighting with Tommy like right before the film is finished.
And that wasn't in the book?
From what I understand, that's not in the book from talking to people and from Brad Jones's review.
Okay.
Yeah, but overall I liked it, but it's not like it's a really good film, and it's even more enhanced if you've seen like The Room like right before it.
Which I also have not seen.
Yeah, like I'd say definitely go watch The Room before you see Disaster Artist, because...
Yeah, that's the reason I didn't want to see Disaster Artist, is because I haven't seen The Room. And, unfortunately, the theater that I was planning to go see The Room in closed down before I could see it, so...
Rip.
Oh, rip the, Sunshine Landmark Cinema.
This is why you should have paired up with Movie Pass, Landmark. Let me see your movies for free. I could save even more money.
I don't know how that would save a theater that was losing money.
Because more people would go, because technically they wouldn't be spending money.
Yeah, I guess if they buy concessions.
Well, no, they still pay full price. Movie Pass pays them for the tickets, full price.
Oh, okay.
So they don't lose money off the tickets.
Then how does Movie Pass earn money?
They sell data.
Oh, okay. Man, data must be really valuable if it can cover up all those costs.
Yeah.
Mm.
So I'd really have to give this for Logan, just based off that narrative, because it feels like the definitive Wolverine story. And, like, just the sheer adrenaline and emotion in that narrative, like, just from, like, Wolverine's journey in that film is just so great. It really changes your perspective on what superhero movies can be.
Well, I don't want to go that far and say, oh, this film changed what superhero movies could be, because they could always have been anything.
Well,
it's just
yeah,
that people didn't think that they could be like
changes.
this.
It changes how you think Hollywood can handle them.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, I am going to give it to Logan, too, because unlike with these other screenplays, Logan is basically an original screenplay that is based on elements from its source material, but it isn't actually, a direct adaptation of that source material. It's, inspired by that source material, but it is, more of, an original assembly of those ideas.
Yeah, I think it takes elements from the X-23 storylines and then mixes it together.
Yeah,
with some other original content.
So while there was a lot of material to draw from, the screenplay of the film, the final product, really reflects the level of writing skill of the writers involved, even more so than the other screenplays, which are based on strong source material. And while those writers did bring that to life for a screenplay, I think Logan had, to go the extra mile, since it wasn't, directly adapting its source material, but, assembling a new story out of it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So let's move on to talk about a best original screenplay. We've got nominated are The Big Sick, written by Emily V. Gordon and Kumail Nanjiani. Get Out, written by Jordan Peele. Lady Bird, written by Greta Gerwig. The Shape of Water, screenplay by Guillermo del Toro and Vanessa Taylor. Story by Guillermo del Toro. And Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, written by Martin McDonough.
I'd probably have to give this to Get Out.
These are all pretty strong screenplays. I haven't seen The Big Sick, so I can't.
I've heard really good things about The Big Sick, but I still have to watch it.
I also have heard really good things. I know Brad Jones really liked it.
Yeah, I like Nanjiani as an actor, so I'd assume that his screenplay writing is probably pretty good too.
Yeah, I think these are all really well written screenplays, the ones that I've seen. But I guess I will have to agree with you, VLord. Get Out is probably the most original of these screenplays.
Yeah, I feel Get Out just does a great job of, I think, really kind of taking all these elements together, kind of the, action you really want from, a thriller, the tension, the kind of just overall tone of a horror film, but then taking a twist on it and adding these elements, kind of these themes about racism, and really kind of, flipping a switch of sorts to kind of make its own more unique spin on what a horror film is.
Yeah, it was one of the most effective horror films for me in a while because it was rooted in something that felt very real. And honestly, another great strength of the screenplay is that it is very funny.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's Jordan Peele, yeah.
He has a great sense of humor.
Yeah, Jordan Peele has always, I think, had, a great talent as a comedian. I mean, if you remember Keanu from, 2016, that film was hilarious, and his stand-up stuff and just stuff that he's done for Comedy Central and all that stuff has all been great.
Yeah. So, yeah, I guess we're both in agreement that Get Out should win.
Yeah.
Then let's move on to Best Supporting Actress. And the nominees are Mary J. Blige for Mudbound as Florence Jackson, Allison Janney for I, Tonya as Lavonna Golden, Leslie Manville for Phantom Thread as Cyril Woodcock, Laurie Metcalf for Lady Bird as Marion McPherson, and Octavia Spencer for The Shape of Water as Zelda Delilah Fuller.
This is a tough one for me. I'd say maybe I'd have to give it to Allison Janney in I, Tonya.
For Tanya's mom?
Yeah, for Tanya's mom.
She was a very well-acted character. What did you like most about her as a performance?
I think I just really liked how she kind of just stuck to the... She just hit it really, well, the, whole, kind of just, kind of stuck up, shitty mother type, I guess stereotype character. And I feel like the comedy bits with her two were also just really good. But at the same time, you could also really tell that, oh god, she really is a terrible person.
Yeah, I mean, the character is great, and I think the performance is great. but I don't know if it's the strongest one. One thing I want to say is that I am very happy that Mary J. Blige was nominated for Mudbound, and not Carey Mulligan for her role as Laura McAllen in that film. Though I don't know, maybe the reason she wasn't nominated was because technically Laura McAllen is considered a main heroine? I don't know. I wouldn't really say that.
Probably.
But that's kind of odd to me because, like, both families on that movie have, like, equal importance. So, like, I don't know how you would qualify which one of those two actresses should go to Best Actress and Best Supporting Actress. Regardless, I'm glad that Mary J. Blige was nominated for her role as Florence Jackson because that was a very well-acted character. I don't think it was the best of these roles, or, like, the best. It wasn't really even the best performance in that film, so it's kind of weird that it was the only performance nomination from that film, because, like, man, I would think that Jason Mitchell's role as Ronsel, or Garrett Hedlund's role as Jamie McAllen, or, yeah, I would think those would be the ones to choose. I don't know. In any case, I actually think that Best Actress should go to Laurie Metcalf for Marion McPherson, because I think that was a very interesting and nuanced character that was really brought to life and expertly, like, portrayed in a way that felt real by McPherson. Because with Lavanya Golden, that felt like a caricature. Like, it was an entertaining caricature, but it felt like a caricature. And then all the other characters, Cyril, Flora, and Zelda, they were interesting people, but they weren't necessarily real feeling people. They still felt like characters, but Marion felt like a person to me. Like, that felt like a real mother to me. And I think that Laurie Metcalf really, really brought that role to life and made it, like, because Lady Bird's relationship with her mother is the central thesis of that film. It's like the main relationship. So everything rode on, like, how good those two performances were, and she played her half on it expertly. I definitely have to give it to Laurie Metcalf here.
Well, okay.
What's your opinion on her role as Marion McPherson?
I really liked her. I mean, I feel that she, like, I agree with, like, most of what you said. Like, additionally, I also feel like she just did, like, a very good kind of job of really kind of feeling like this realistic mother, like, in her situation, like, both, like, with, like, her daughter's, like, Lady Bird's dissatisfaction with her own life, and her not really being able to be openly emotional with her.
Yeah, I agree, and that's why I really loved her performance. Again, that felt like a real mother. And, since the film was trying to really connect with, like, a real situation, a situation that felt real, and, it was inspired by the director's own experiences, so, those actresses really brought those experiences to life, I felt. So, let's talk about the Best Supporting Actor. And the nominees are William Dafoe for The Florida Project as Bobby Hicks, Woody Harrelson for 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri as Chief Bill Willoughby, Richard Jenkins for The Shape of Water as Giles, Christopher Plummer for All the Money in the World as J. Paul Getty, and Sam Rockwell for 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri as Officer Jason Dixon. These are all pretty strong performances. The lesser of these performances is probably Giles, which is, even though that was a character I really loved, I don't think that was as major a character as these other roles, or, like, as nuanced a character in terms of the range of what the actor had to do to portray that role. I feel that's actually unfair, because Giles is a character with a lot of nuance and depth, but, just compared to the other characters here, there was just more with them to really dig into, and more with them that the actors really had to bring out of them. Christopher Plummer, I actually think, will get the award for J. Paul Getty. Like, I actually think the Oscars will give it to him. Wanted to make a statement against Kevin Spacey, who was originally playing the role, and they had shot all his scenes as him, but then, the controversy came out about his sexual harassment crimes. So Ridley Scott made the decision to remove all of Kevin Spacey's scenes from the movie and recast J. Paul Getty with Christopher Plummer, and they managed to do that in 2 weeks, I think. It was a really short turnaround time. So just for that incredible accomplishment alone, for salvaging that movie that would have been box office poison otherwise, if it had retained Kevin Spacey after that controversy, I think the Oscars are going to award Christopher Plummer for that accomplishment, and especially to make a statement against Kevin Spacey.
If only All the Money in the World was actually a good movie.
Yeah, I didn't care for All the Money in the World, but I will say that I do think Christopher Plummer was good as J. Paul Getty, and I wouldn't be disappointed if he won Best Supporting Actor because he did the role very well.
Yeah, I guess personally my favorite among these, is probably Sam Rockwell as Jason Dixon.
Yeah, even though I had problems with that character, Sam Rockwell's performance as Dixon was really, really incredible. He really brought that role to life in a major way.
Yeah, and I also really liked Willoughby as well. And it's kind of surprising to see that 3 Billboards got 2 different supporting actor nominations.
I don't think it's very surprising because those roles are just so standout performances.
That is true, yeah. But I'd say if it was between Woody Harrelson and Sam Rockwell, I'd have to give that to Sam Rockwell.
And that's a pretty good choice, and, maybe he will win it, but I'm going to choose, actually, Willem Dafoe. Because even though I have a lot of problems with the Florida Project, Willem Dafoe's role as Bobby Hicks was my favorite thing about it. Because that was a very fascinating character, and, the way we see him, both, have to be harsh with his tenants and, have to deal with these kind of annoying kids, but also stand up for them and try to protect them in his own way. I think it was a really, really fascinating role, and I think Willem Dafoe really expressed that range, and he was my favorite thing about that movie. So, just because I really liked him so much in that movie, and he stood out to me so much because he was the thing I liked most about that movie, I'm gonna give him my nod for Best Supporting Actor. But I do think that both Woody Harrelson and Sam Rockwell were really incredible for their roles as well. But I also think that Christopher Plummer is the one who will actually win, because that just makes sense in terms of, the Oscar making a statement and whatever.
Yeah. So I guess next category.
Moving on to the best, the top 4 categories, aka the categories people care about the most. And we're going to start with Best Actress. Nominated for Best Actress are Sally Hawkins for The Shape of Water as Elisa Esposito, Frances McDormand for 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri as Mildred Hayes, Margot Robbie for I, Tonya as Tanya Harding, Saoirse Ronan for Lady Bird as Christine Lady Bird McPherson, and Meryl Streep for The Post as Katharine Graham. So the lesser of these roles, I feel, is Meryl Streep's role as Katharine Graham, because, Meryl Streep, she has, the most Oscar nominations in history or whatever. I think, whatever she does, they give her a nomination. And,
basically,
she was fine as Katharine Graham, I guess, but it's not, a standout role for her.
Yeah, The Post, in my opinion, was just kind of one of those middle-of-the-road movies. It's good, but it's not, particularly, amazing.
Yeah, I didn't think her performance in particular really added much to that movie. I think they could have actually gotten someone better than her to play that role, but I don't know.
Maybe. I guess, I really like Tom Hanks in that movie.
Yeah, Tom Hanks was good. He was my favorite part about that movie.
Yeah, Tom Hanks is what sells that movie for me.
Yeah,
Meryl Streep was, okay, but I don't know. It's not really anything
Yeah, it's a
amazing.
shame since, she should have been the main character of that film. It should have been about her, but
it's not really. It's more about Tom Hanks.
Yeah. There's some problems with that movie. Yeah. But in any case, this is a hard one, because for me, I think the other 4 contenders are really, really good. Sally Hawkins, because she's depicting a character who is mute and has to communicate through body language, I feel like there's just so much work required of that, and I think she just did it expertly. But at the same time, Margot Robbie as Tanya Harding makes that movie. Her performance makes that film. And Frances McDormand as Mildred Hayes also kind of makes that film in its own way, too. I mean, not as much as Margot Robbie as Tanya, but what's your opinion, WeLord?
This is a tough one, because I like all the remaining four. Maybe I'd have to give to Sally Hawkins. Simply because, like you said, she's playing a mute character, and just conveying all the emotions and all the just things that her character's feeling is just so much more difficult. And she pulls it off, like, fantastically.
Man, I totally agree with you, but, man, a lot of these actresses would be well-deserving of the award. I think I will give it to Tanya Harding. I will give it to Margot Robbie as Tanya Harding, because I really do think that she made that film. Like, more than any of these other actresses, I think that that film would be so much lesser. It would not work if Margot Robbie hadn't been as good as she was as Tanya Harding. So I'm going to give it to her. And now we go on to Best Actor. We have nominated for Best Actor Timothée Chalamet for Call Me By Your Name as Elio Perlman. We have Daniel Day-Lewis for Phantom Thread as Reynolds Woodcock. Daniel Kaluuya for Get Out as Chris Washington. Gary Oldman for Darkest Hour as Winston Churchill. And Denzel Washington for Roman J. Israel Esquire as Roman J. Israel. I have not seen Roman J. Israel. I heard that it is not a very good movie. I'm sure Denzel Washington is fine in it. Same for Darkest Hour, which I have seen. Gary Oldman was fine in that, but I didn't really think that was a very good movie, and I didn't, think that performance was like... I mean, it might have been the most interesting part about that movie, I guess, but I don't know. I don't think, it was so integral that I couldn't imagine anyone else portray Winston Churchill. Daniel Kaluuya as Chris Washington. He did really good in that role. I really liked that character. I really felt for him, but also not as standout to me as a performance. Timothée Chalamet as Elio Perlman. Yeah, I mean, that guy. Man, that crying scene alone, that had earned him the nomination, I think.
Timothée Chalamet is my pick for this easily, in my opinion, simply because he does such a good job of really depicting a person of his age, a teenager, who is kind of in this kind of more confused stage in his life, is not really sure about his own sexuality, about his own life, or really his own emotions, and he just does such a great job of depicting that kind of youth, that transition to maturity, but yet still immature.
Yeah, it's
like the one scene where he's like, I think it's like an orange or whatever, and he's like jacking.
It's a peach.
Wait, is it peach?
A peach?
Okay, yeah.
It's a peach.
Yeah, he's after he has sex with I forget the guy's name, but after he has sex with him, and him just trying to masturbate in the peach to just make sure that he can still function sexually, because it's implied that he was, I think, bottoms in the intercourse, but, it's just such kind of this interesting scene and kind of really powerful, regardless of how ridiculous it sounds and how they kind of joke about it in the film, because this is the type of stuff that, just mentally a lot of the kids go through who are part of, the LGBT community and stuff like that, and as someone who identifies as bisexual, I think his character really kind of hit me at home, I feel.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way as you in all those respects. But I'm going to give it to Daniel Day-Lewis as Reynolds Woodcock, because that was the most fascinating character to me out of all of these characters, and I think that is because of how Daniel Day-Lewis portrays him as this kind of guy you can't figure out, as this guy wrapped around so many enigmatic layers that it's hard to pin him down, and he feels dangerous but seductive at the same time, and it's just really fascinating to see how that character's mind works and how it twists and turns, and I think Daniel Day-Lewis really, really sold that character in a way that I can't imagine anyone else being that character. And also, I think Daniel Day-Lewis will get the Oscar for this because this is supposedly his final role. So, I don't know. I don't know if that'll end up being true. He might, because Daniel Day-Lewis trolls retiring as much as Hayao Miyazaki.
Yeah, I mean, the guy's only 60. He'll be fine.
Yeah, but I do think that I really liked him as Reynolds Woodcock. And yeah, that was my favorite performance of all these, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big fan of Phantom Thread, but I definitely enjoyed Daniel Day-Lewis's performance as Woodcock. Yeah. Like, I feel like, yeah, like you said, it's really hard to pin down what he's saying. That's part of the most interesting part of the film for me, is that so many of these characters, there's like a lot of mystery around what they're really feeling, what they're really kind of imagining around them. And I feel like the payoff at the end's kind of disappointing for me, but the entire journey of it is really cool.
I love the payoff. The payoff is like what makes the movie.
The payoff is more weird, if anything, to me.
No, it's amazing.
Masochism. It's like double masochism, Sid.
Yes, and that's what's so awesome about it. They're both so messed up, and it's amazing. I love it so much. It's so awesome. She's poisoning him and she's totally into it. It's such a messed up relationship.
Honestly, when that happened in the movie, my entire theater just started laughing.
Oh man, I wish I had been in a theater that was as reactive as yours was then. I saw it at a time where there were like few other people.
To be fair, it was kind of a shitty screening because like the girl next to me kept talking to her dad. And was on her phone. I just wanted to, like, tell her to shut up, but I didn't want to, like, cause a scene or anything.
God, those people are the worst. Yeah. Well, but, yeah, so it's Timothée Chalamet for you, Daniel Day-Lewis for me, and we'll see who wins. Because I think those are definitely the top two competitors for Best Actor for sure.
Yeah.
But let's move on to Best Director! We've got Christopher Nolan for Dunkirk, Jordan Peele for Get Out, Greta Gerwig for Lady Bird, Paul Thomas Anderson for Phantom Thread, and Guillermo del Toro for The Shape of Water.
I'd probably have to give it to Del Toro.
Yeah. It's either between him and Christopher Nolan, because those films had like such a strong vision to them that was so expertly communicated and handled by their directors. But I like The Shape of Water and what it was doing more than what I liked with what Nolan was doing with Dunkirk, even though I do think, Dunkirk is a great piece of cinema. Like, as a film, I enjoyed what Guillermo del Toro did with Shape of Water a whole lot more.
Dunkirk is probably like one of Nolan's best films, just from a directorial perspective. But yeah. I feel with Shape of Water and Del Toro, he really has taken his experience and really, really filled it into this film. Like, you can really kind of just, shot by shot, everything just looks fantastic.
Yeah, it's just pretty incredible all around. I don't know if it's like one of Del Toro's best films. I mean, like, I don't know if it's one of Del Toro's, like, best, it is one of his strong films, I think. But, like, I don't know if it's, like, really holds a candle to Pan's Labyrinth, necessarily. But, it is still, like, a big visual treat for the eyes, in my opinion. It has a great story, great message, and the filmmaking is great all around. So, I love that movie, and it is a Del Toro movie, through and through. No one else could have made that. I feel like you could probably say the same about, some of these other movies, too. In fact, you can definitely say the same about all of these other movies and all these other directors nominated for these movies. But I think Del Toro's touch shines through the strongest when it comes to The Shape of Water compared to all these other films.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's interesting. This is Christopher Nolan's first Oscar nomination for Best Director. The first time he's been nominated for Best Director. Which is surprising to me. You wouldn't think so.
He's for a guy who hasn't gotten a nomination before, he's kind of a pretty well-known director.
So yeah, it's pretty interesting. I feel like because Christopher Nolan is such a big name, I wouldn't be surprised if they give the Oscar to him, because Dunkirk is a critically acclaimed movie.
Yeah,
but
I mean,
I think it is going to be a toss-up between him and Del Toro.
Yeah, I think.
Or, actually, they might give it to Jordan Peele, because he is a relatively new talent that hasn't really made buzz with Get Out. But I don't know if, Get Out is necessarily the best directed film. So, that'll be interesting to see what they do here. I kind of want Jordan Peele to win the Best Director, because Monkey Jones promised that he is going to delete his YouTube channel, or at least his Monkey Jones 2 YouTube channel, if Jordan Peele wins Best Director. So, I want that to happen just to see him go through with that.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. I think he also said that he would delete E. Rich's YouTube channel if Logan won Best Adapted Screenplay. So I guess we'll see when it comes to that too. Making pretty do or die bets on these nominations here. That Monkey Jones. That's why we love him.
Monkey Jones is gonna break your bones.
He knows what he's talking about. He's got stats, But anyway, we finally arrived, VLord, at the number one category, the category everyone talks about, the category everyone wants to know, the one that closes off the night of the Oscars. We've got Best Picture, and the nominees are Call Me By Your Name, Darkest Hour, Dunkirk, Lady Bird, Get Out, Phantom Thread, The Post, The Shape of Water, and 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri.
I guess my favorite out of these is Get Out.
Really? I mean, these are a really strong batch of Best Picture contenders.
Aside from Darkest Hour. We don't talk about Darkest Hour.
And The Post. Those are whatever. I, Tonya should have been nominated over those two. For sure.
Blade Runner.
Or Blade Runner. Yeah, that was such a huge snub for Best Picture. But, of course, it's a genre film. It's not going to get in. I mean, I guess in that regard, it's incredible that Get Out was nominated, because horror films usually don't get this kind of acclaim. So, yeah, this is a big thing. And I kind of want to see Get Out win just because of that groundbreaking fact.
Yeah,
but
I have my doubts that it's going to win, simply because there's been news spreading that people within the Academy are refusing to even watch it.
Yeah, because apparently it does not constitute their idea of what an Oscar film should be. But that's something that'll be changing in the future, you old fogies, so too bad.
Or not.
Well, hopefully it will, because society is always changing. So we can only hope, right?
Yeah.
Anyway.
But what's your pick, Sid?
My favorite film of the Best Picture nominees is The Shape of Water. That was the film I enjoyed watching the most. I love Del Toro's style. I love every frame of that movie. It's just so beautifully shot. It's a really cool love story. It's got really great performances. It's a really satisfying takedown of toxic masculinity disguised as all-American family values and how destructive and oppressive that is. Pretty freaking great.
Yeah, I mean, Shape of Water would probably be my second or third choice. But yeah, it's definitely well-deserved.
Yeah.
But damn, we got to the end of this somehow.
It's kind of weird. I feel like we've ended Best Picture in kind of a whimper, but it really is hey, this is matter of fact. These are our favorite films in these categories, so of course this is why we want to see them win Best Picture, and then we kind of explain what we liked about these movies when we talked about them in other categories. But, yep. So, I guess we'll see who was right, who called it right, and I guess when we were completely wrong and something we totally didn't suspect.
Just watch us get none of these categories right.
I gotta imagine we gotta get some of these right.
Boss Baby's gonna win animated film.
That's not... No.
Best animated...
I will delete the Manga Mavericks YouTube channel if Boss Baby wins the best animated feature.
Silent Child will win Best Live Action.
I could see that.
Negative Space will win animation. Star Wars will win every category it's in.
See, those aren't things that I would think are totally out of the realm of possibility, like Boss Baby winning Best Animated Feature. That's impossible. The rest of those, I can see happening.
Just watch it. It's gonna happen. So Sony paid off a bunch of of the voters. And then just show the gullible ones cookies is for closers for 2 hours.
Very unlikely it doesn't go to Coco. I mean, look, the Oscars are shown on ABC, VLord. Disney has kind of a stake in this thing. It's not really a surprise why Disney takes away Best Animated Feature most years.
Yeah, you never know. DreamWorks and Fox might be plotting something. They might have gathered up enough money to push Boss Baby.
I feel that is very unlikely. I feel like it's going to be pretty hard to convince anybody to vote for Boss Baby over Coco.
They'll find a way, Sid. They'll find a way.
I guess they'll find a way like Drake and Josh. They'll open up their eyes and see... I don't know how the rest of that song goes. It's been years.
And that about does it for this episode of Manga Mavericks at Movies, talking about the 90th Annual Academy Awards. You can find VLordGTZ at VLordGTZ on Twitter, and you can find me on Twitter at LumRanmaYasha, and you can find both of us on my anime list, Animation Revelation, and anywhere we're at under those names. As for the show, you can follow the show on Twitter at manga_mavericks, on Tumblr at mangamavericks.tumblr.com, and on YouTube. Our channel name is Manga Mavericks. That's YouTube/C/Manga Mavericks. And we're also on iTunes under Manga Mavericks. Please make sure to subscribe to us on both iTunes and YouTube. Watch and like our content on there. Leave a rating and review on iTunes. All those things really helps the show out and helps us continue to grow. And you can also follow us, of course, on all-comic.com, which is where our podcasts go up first. That about does it for this episode. We'll see you next time as we give our thoughts on what we think are the true best movies of 2017. So until then, sayonara!